Okay, hello everyone. I just want to start with thanking Aya for the introduction and expressing how grateful I am to be here and seeing this conference come to life. What I'm going to present today is a reflection on spatial attempts at making sense of a new planetary geological layer, which is design. The title marks attention. So there's design as projection and extraction, but then there's ecology as understanding entanglements and damaged relations. I'm going to start with some visuals from my thesis, and then going on to other spatial endeavors at attempting to get a deeper understanding of the spaces that shape our planet. So when I was first starting my thesis research, we were obviously really unsettled. This was 2023 and or 2024, sorry, and we were very unsettled with the state of the architectural pedagogy in our universities, and we were looking for an alternative. So I first started with just looking at the Palestinian museums, archives, but then in parallel to looking at the archives, also starting to produce visuals just to see how far can this spatial research be taken. Then I started asking my parents about narratives from their upbringing, as my grandparents were displaced from the city of El Ramle in 1948. And so this is a story. My dad told me about his mom making underwear and pants out of the UNRWA tent fabric. So I was just listening to these stories in parallel to looking at the archive and trying to make sense of everything. But at some point during the syllabus of a thesis project, I guess you have to decide on a site. And what I knew is that I wanted an accessible site, one that I can frequently visit, because I was interested in research in walking as a research method. So I decided on Gaza refugee camp in Jarash in Jordan, which is about 45 minutes from where I live. This map shows the displacement of Gaza Jarash camp residents in Jordan. It shows their movement from Gaza through Jericho and then passing the Sharia or the Jordan River onto Jarash in Jordan, where I'm based, of course. And I was also trying to pinpoint the temporalities of the process of displacement. So how many days and nights does it take for a family to walk this trip? The distance, the direction. This is a map of the UNRWA base camp in relation to its environment. So there's a natural reserve to the south and some neighboring Jordanian villages. Going back to the archive and looking at Palestinian daily practices, what started to emerge were some experimental and sometimes jokeful graphics, because the way my parents and whoever I would ask would narrate the stories would be in a very joyful manner. So I was producing work that doesn't necessarily relate to an architectural practice, but again, it's about trying to make sense of the space and what governs it. This is sort of to make sense of the landscape. This is the trip from my house to the camp, which I made quite a few times. So this is an image from the car, starting the road. This is around a stream on the way. This is an artificial water dam, which I'm going to get back to in a bit. It becomes another anchor of the project with the camp. This is an image taken on the shore of the dam. And then this is more to the north, going into the camp. And then these are images from the street of the UNRWA base camp. So again, it's looking at the temporalities from the archives, but then also from contemporary lived experience. So on the right, we have a picture of berry harvest that I encountered on the right, and on the left, farmers harvesting cucumbers in Gaza from the archive. And then again, on the top, fishermen on the shore in Gaza, 1987. And then on the bottom, fishermen I encountered in the artificial water dam that's near the camp. So these were attempts to grasp spatial dynamics east of the Mediterranean. So here, considering refugee heritage that was carried across the river to Jordan. These are some of the types of fish from the artificial dam, which are toxic to eat because the water is contaminated, but then the active fishing was still done, which I was finding really fascinating, to go from commodity to recreation in diaspora. So these trips were manifesting into trying to establish a new pedagogy, a new method to deal with the land. So two anchors of the project became the dam and the camp as spaces of exception where the norms of governing don't really work, because the dam's water fluctuates based on when they open when they let the water out, or the fluctuating water levels. And then the camp in Jordan doesn't really fall under government rule. It's a bit more of a special unit. And they are 8 kilometers apart, but this distance was, from what I was talking to the residents, is constantly hiked. And so it's not something you do by car, it's a walk. These are some images from the camp and the dam with the first design intervention that came up, which was a device that surveys the earth and extracts a diary entry written from Mother Earth's perspective. This is an image of the waterline of the dam, which was always changing depending on the time of visit. This is a map of where the visitor would park their car and then sort of descend onto the shore. And so I was trying to visualize ways of how a design intervention might even come to life under the existing status quo. This is a visualization of of what would a pavilion at the shore be made up of. So some fabric and some other metal parts that you can carry from the car or from the camp and then onto the shore. And so the design that emerges from such a process doesn't really attempt to resolve any existing issues. It could be merely architecture to exist there for a short while, where people can exist and talk about the status quo, but then maybe the water line is gonna wash it away, or it's gonna be probably dismantled by the local police. So that was sort of concluding the reflections on the dam. On the camp, the prevalent theme was the really lack of public space. It's such a dense place. So looking at the satellite maps in between the visits, there's this green patch within the camp, which turns out to be the Islamic cemetery. So upon a visit there, I see that it has 3 openings. So it's open 24/7. It's not gated or anything. And then there's an empty patch right on this side where it's too steep, so they can't really have any new graves. And then I also observed that it's being used as a communal space because there were many people visiting the graves at multiple points during the visit. So here I do a projection of as many of the graves as I can, and then trying to see what this space can host other than the graves. This is another speculative drawing on how an intervention can be also user-built through connecting the cemetery to one of the nearby houses. So can a cemetery host a camp's Palestinian popular culture in the diaspora? And the resulting design is a group of mud-made benches that activate the space of the cemetery in relation to a girls' school on this gate, and then a residential neighborhood from the north. So as I was saying, this research and design was coming up as I was going through my thesis. But these are some more academically intense reflections. So I don't know how different it is in different universities, but for mine, we had to design a space of a certain square meter area, but then the pavilion on the shore was 9 square meters, and the cemetery was a non-roofed space, so that wouldn't count. So I have to design like 3,000 square meters more so I can pass. So I was thinking of what I can do. And then during the trips between the camp and the dam, there is this compound of villas that I later learned is built for some aristocrats in Jordan. And so I start speculating on a geologist's house in the area between the dam and the camp with an olive grove and its own sort of water filtration system and water reservoir underground with a bathhouse. And so this villa ends up being the legible design outcome for the academy. These are some of the plans. And at some point, I just left the plans unfurnished, I think, because I was just adding empty rooms underground. This is how the pinup looked. And then during this presentation, I'm contrasting my attempts at understanding space between the academy and the art institution. So looking at raw materials in an attempt to grasp the aesthetics embedded in the unprocessed material. And then I started examining the white space, like the white box, the galleries, because here I was trying to dry some flowers within a stack of books, but then they started rotting. And I believe that's just because they were within the white space, which is supposed to be very controlled in terms of humidity, but then it really doesn't allow for any life to exist. So I thought that was interesting, this idea of museumization. And I started sort of mapping, taking the objects from the garden into the white space, and this sort of movement of energy and materials, and then computing them and what comes up after that. And so the result of these reflections manifested in an installation of a floating olive sapling that's at once being killed by the saline fluid, but also being suspended and being connected to the sensors kit, along with some other ecological fragments from the area around the white space. And then next to it was a video explaining the whole process and the violence of uprooting and the sort of the vegetal and the organic themes that we see, transparency, containment. Another thing I find myself going back to is this idea of manufactured landscapes. Again, this new geological layer of earth that we put. And so this is a sand sculpture again within the white space and extending out, and seeing the tension between the cleanliness and the messiness of the raw material in the white space. And then what happens if it starts mimicking an existing system with water and moisture going through within the white space. And then this was another installation where the intention at the very beginning was to have this 1-to-1 scale orthogonal projection of my body on the floor of the white space made up of rock fragments from around it. And then have visitors pick up a rock and it would be archived in a database. So you would see its original picture in the landscape. And then they would sort of take it and transport it outside. So yeah, I'm currently interested in this movement of natural objects from the environment to the white box. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.